I'm Alan Walker. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Udder. We are a HR technology consulting business. In a nutshell, we help HR folk do cool stuff with tech. The business came about because of my previous background. My early career, I worked in IT. I was a CTO. I was a developer, and I made the unusual jump to then move into the world of HR and TA. And Udder is really a coming together of both of those careers to create a business that I can do the best of both of those things and not do the stuff I don't like doing.
Working with quite a diverse client base at the moment in the TA
Yeah.
space, how do you see sort of the market and the landscape in that TA world?
Yeah, okay. But do work with a diverse client base, everything from small companies of a few hundred people to large multinationals of 70, 80,000 people. And what we're seeing across that market is variety in terms of how change is hitting them to a certain degree and why it's hitting them. Some of them are having change thrust upon them. From the C-suite down, they're driving huge change in terms of driving for efficiency and profitability, and we're seeing headcounts either frozen or cut quite drastically across businesses in some cases. And particularly that latter point, that's bound to hit HR and TA. They are the biggest recipients of headcount changes. Through boom, TA's busy. We're hiring, they're maxed out. But when we start to hear about hiring freezes or slowdown, etc., that's bound to hit TA and hit it hard. But there are still organisations that are absolutely hiring, and they're potentially hiring different types of folk. We know that the market for highly skilled folk to help organisations leverage the new world of AI, etc., they're in huge demand. And TA are being challenged to find those people. But the challenge is every TA function is being challenged to find those people. So it's a proper fight. The other challenge we've got is that suddenly every man and his dog is an AI expert, which is a very challenging piece for TA people to navigate because they're not AI experts yet. So they're having to find ways of wheedling out finding the needle in the haystack, should we say. And then we've got the other challenge where TA teams, even the ones where they have had head count freezes, are being told to do more with less. So they're being told to be more efficient, more productive, etc., without any major investment necessarily coming in from above.
You obviously spoke about technology, and technology is what you do. That's your sort of thing, isn't it? So how can technology support the industry in these challenging times? What value can technology add?
Even the ones. That's a really broad question. So technology across the let's narrow down to talent acquisition, the recruitment piece. There are opportunities for technology to support every single phase of the recruitment process, in my mind. We've seen new tech come onto the market in the last 12 months or so, where people are getting very excited about agentic AI and technology that's powering an end-to-end recruitment process. But the reality is that tech's kind of been around, not agentic AI, but the tech to power a whole recruitment process and automate it. It's been around for years. It's been about clipping it together. And actually, the bigger question has always been not can we automate recruitment, but should we? And a lot of the time, the should we bit has been no, because it's not going to deliver a great experience. I think with modern agentic AI, that experience has been elevated purely from something that's very transactional to something that can be very enriching, and it can be very personalized to the individual, even though they clearly will know that they're being chaperoned by some kind of AI through that process. But I think as long as the chaperoning is high quality and it delivers what they need, that's absolutely fine. But drilling down into more specific areas, so let's think about assessment as an example, particularly when it comes to assessing talent in a space, a profession, a skill set where it's likely a recruiter is going to be a deep expert. I think leaning into technology to support that is an absolute no-brainer, especially when you're hiring at scale in a particular area where you're probably hiring the folk who might be managing a function in the future. So you haven't got a manager to lead into. You've got the manager's manager who may be no more expert than you as a TA leader, say, hey, we need to hire folk like this. And I think these are the skills we need. And I've spent half an hour on ChatGPT writing a job description, so let's just go with it. But nobody in that business might really know what they're looking for in terms of skill set. So leveraging some of the assessment technology that's out there where vendors will have built the right assessments to measure that kind of stuff is pretty much a no-brainer.
Recruitment sometimes in an industry can be very traditional and core to its values. Do you find that there's a reluctance at times within the industry to embrace that technology?
I think that recruiters have it from two sides. They listen to the noise of what's happening in the candidate market, and with anything, the noisiest people are always the most disgruntled, because those that are kind of cool with stuff don't say anything. Those that are delighted might say stuff, but sometimes people expect to be delighted, so they often just stay quiet because that's their expectation. But the people that are really annoyed, don't like something, aren't particularly happy with it, which might make up a relatively small percentage in the grand scheme of things, are the ones that are really noisy. And we have a tendency as humans to listen to noise without really looking at the context of it and actually saying, is it representative of the overall candidate market? So you've got what candidates or noisy candidates are saying that recruiters are listening to, and some of them are saying, I will never go through any kind of AI assessment or technology-based assessment ever. I think it's really dehumanizing. And then you have on the other side, you've got obviously hiring managers who may also be listening to the noise from candidates and go, oh, we shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. Candidates don't like it. And then you've got the recruiter who's either an advocate for technology and is able to push back and knows how to push back and can communicate the value back to both of those sets of people, or you've got the one who might lean a little bit that way themselves and goes, yes, you're right. Yeah, let's not do this. Yeah. The reality is somewhere in the middle. Technology isn't always the answer to everything, but it often, in the right place at the right time, can absolutely be a way of leveling up your process.
Yeah, agreed. You're very right in what you said. There's two camps. There's either we're very pro this, or we're not so pro it, we're reluctant, or we're afraid of it, or whatever it may be. In my view, and I'd be interested to get your views, that perspective then can potentially lead to a disrupted candidate experience, because you get some employers that will out and out say, we're banning the use of AI, therefore you can't use it during our process. And then on the flip side of it, we encourage the use of AI, feel free to use it in whatever application you see fit, and so on and so forth. In your view, is there a right or wrong answer to that, or should it be led to more employer prerogative, or do you think there should be some restrictions and some governance around it before it's introduced into a process?
Are we talking about the organisation themselves using AI as part of the process rather than the candidate?
No, so the candidate. So I think you see a lot of adverts that will say, we prohibit the use of AI.
Okay, so got it.
Type stuff. So, yeah, what's your views on that?
I think prohibiting the use of AI is like prohibiting the use of a calculator for a maths assessment. And somebody should be able to use the tools that they have readily available to conduct their job. And also, therefore, they should be able to have those same tools that are readily available to conduct an assessment process. Because if they're going to have them when they start the job, then why not assess the use of them during an assessment process? Yeah. If a company says, hey, we don't have calculators at our business, you're going to have to do everything on paper, then fair enough. You assess the individual going through that process based on the tools they will have available to them in the organisation. But the reality is they will have a calculator. They will possibly have access to AI-based tools, whether it's through something like Copilot, through Microsoft, or just direct access to a ChatGPT or a Claude or something along those lines. They've got that access, then why not allow them to use it during an assessment process?
Yeah, okay. Do you think that potentially the use of AI or AI in general through recruitment can create sort of diversity and inclusion issues? So as AI providers moved more towards, let's say, a paid for model that can have impact on the socioeconomic backgrounds of candidates not being able to afford? What's your views there?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think in most markets, you could argue that the off-the-shelf AI systems are pretty affordable for most people at the moment where they are with their kind of price point. And the free models are pretty damn good anyway, even without that. In other markets, that might not be the case where it becomes unaffordable, particularly if eventually the free products go. But I think certainly for now, I'm not convinced it would create any degree of inequity. I think actually it can help level the playing field to a certain degree. I don't know whether you guys have read the study. I think it was Boston Consulting Group did a study of AI usage across a massive tranche of their consulting team. And they found that for high performers, there was very little uplift in terms of their work product, the quality of it, the output, etc. Lowest performers, the ones that potentially would be under consideration for letting go at some point, suddenly became high middle performers. So it actually raised the bar for them and helped them become better performers. Their work product increased. And people go, yeah, but that's a false impression. That's not their brain power. But to a certain degree, it doesn't matter how they get to the point of the work product if the work product is good. That's what the end recipient of that work product wants. They want good work. It's like if someone comes to paint my house, I don't really care which paintbrush they use. I care whether they do a good job of painting my house. And that's the output. I'm not going to sit there watching them for 8 hours to assess them. I'm going to go, yeah, great, you've done a good job. Yeah. And I think that's how we should be looking at tooling. If it helps people level up, then fine.
Yeah, great. We spoke about, obviously, the changing market conditions, and obviously the candidate market is probably at its most competitive as it ever has been.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an argument that maybe whilst AI is developing, and it's developing probably really successfully in terms of some of its use and its applications, but do you think maybe AI has maybe outgrown some of the candidate market that we see at the moment in terms of the functionalities there, but actually the skills and the ability to cope with what AI can do hasn't caught up as yet?
Yeah, I think that's, we're seeing tools that are readily accessible now to people for them to do mass applies. So we're getting candidates that used to apply for 10 jobs a week, apply for 1,000 jobs a week or more. And that without doubt that in my mind is often misuse of AI. So in that kind of situation, you've got somebody who could be fabricating or semi-fabricating their skill set, their ability, their worth to churn out thousands and thousands of applications of some that might well be misleading, shall we say, about who they are as an individual. However, we've always had that to a degree as well. We've always had people making misleading applications. And then when you get to the screening stage, the assessment stage, etc., those people get wheedled out. I think, so it becomes one of scale that is the problem. It's the volume that is actually causing the issue rather than necessarily the slightly inflated quality, because not everyone's using these tools. Not everyone's doing 5,000 applications. It goes back to what we were discussing earlier about noise. There's those cases, those isolated cases are thrown out there because the majority of the people, certainly me, I would never want to apply for a job and misrepresent myself, because you will get found out pretty damn quickly. Everyone's maybe a little looser with the truth on a CV. It's a sales document. Ultimately, it's a marketing document. What might only really be 90% might become a 95%, that kind of thing. Everyone does that. But totally fabricating stuff, most people won't do because it's pointless. They know they'll get caught out. Whether they get caught out through the interview process or within 2 days of starting the job, they will get caught out and it will waste their time. So I think where we've got to be doing better is actually making sure that we have the tools in place to catch them before day one. Through assessment is the obvious one, and screening and interviewing, etc. We need to be able to make sure that we've got in place tooling that allows us to assess people where, yes, we may well allow them to use AI tools on their side to go through that assessment, but we see they're working. We see how they've got to that point, and we see that it is powered by the tool rather than pretending they're doing everything from scratch or totally human, etc. Or and it's not a deep fake in a video interview. All of these kind of things are coming out. Again, I think they're isolated incidents, but they will get bigger. But it's about having the right tech to make sure we know what is happening in the situation, rather than going yes or no. I think it's knowledge is the key thing, knowing how the person is taking the assessment.
Yeah, great. And with that in mind, tech being sort of the heart of what your business does, where do you see sort of tech moving the market over the next 12, 24 months?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. One of the things I've become most interested in over the last 12 months, 18 months or so, I'm an X developer, like seriously X, like 20 years ago was the last time I'd done any coding. And I'd maintained an understanding of how things were built without the skills to actually do it. So again, the house analogy, I know a house has doors, windows and a roof, but I'm neither a window fitter, a roofer, or a brickie, so I wouldn't be able to build a house. But I kind of know what the end result should look like. Where we've got to very, very quickly in the last couple of years with large language models and the technology that's using those large language models to superpower them, is that we've got to the point where hobbyists, or even people with no knowledge whatsoever, are spinning up applications themselves and building sometimes pretty damn good tech. At least getting to a point of going, hey, this thing works. It's at MVP stage. Now we need to put all the right security behind it and authorization, etc. But building things that are pretty damn good. And what that's doing is potentially saturating the market with technology, because the bar has been lowered. And what saturation of the market for technology does is it's great from a competition perspective, but it's bad to a certain degree because it's really confusing for TA leaders. So TA leaders now go to market, instead of having to consider 10 products, they're considering 50 products, and they don't know where to start. And the bigger challenge is it's not a TA leader's role to be deeply technical. It's not their role to have a deep understanding of the how. How does this thing work? How is it built? Is it secure? Is it going to protect my data? How behind the scenes? Because often a lot of this new tooling is basically a wrapper for OpenAI's model. Where is my data going? And can I ensure the privacy of my team? They don't necessarily know how to ask the right questions there. So I think the market has becoming a bit Wild Westy, and products are coming from almost on a daily basis. It seems something new's being released. So we're now finding that a lot of our time, we actually spun up a service to help HR folk and TA folk. A lot of our time now is spent helping them understand how AI can be applied to their organization. But more importantly, how do they do it without getting in a whole heap of trouble from a compliance perspective, a security perspective, a privacy perspective? And how do they take a step back and try and remove themselves from shiny thing syndrome? Because it's really easy to go, ooh, that's pretty. I want that now. I don't know what it does, how it does it, but I want it. And you have to take a step back, because you can make some fundamentally dangerous decisions and implement the wrong technology in your team. And particularly for smaller to medium-sized businesses where they don't perhaps have the same robust technology support internally, there's the danger there of choosing the wrong things. I'm a huge advocate for technology. That's what I do, literally. We wouldn't have any work if people weren't buying and implementing technology. But I think I've increasingly become, maybe it's an age thing, increasingly become more cautious. And again, I think this comes from working with increasingly larger businesses as we've developed, more mindful that you need to do these things properly. Because doing it badly could lead to so much fallout in terms of reputation and press and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, great. Brings me on probably really nicely to another point, and that's around future-proofing. And I think it's more and more prevalent now, and I've worked as a head of TA in both public and private sectors, and I think a lot of the pressures, the pressures and the questions I would get from above is,
what are we doing to ensure return on investment, and what are we doing to ensure quality of hire, so on and so forth. So in your view, how important is future-proofing of recruitment, even more so given the change in market climate and sort of where we are economically as well?
I think it's absolutely essential. Everything is moving along at such pace now that if you're not constantly reviewing how you work and why you do what you do and what you're doing, then you will fall behind so quickly. And future-proofing, it's an interesting one. We put together kind of workbooks and ways of working for many of our clients. So once we've done our bit of work for them that might be quite transformational, we never plan to stay around forever. That's not who we are as a firm. We kind of like projects with start, middle, and end. But what we try and do is always leave our clients feeling very enabled. So they feel they can run with some of this stuff themselves. And part of that is that kind of future-proofing / governance piece. It's about, okay, how do we constantly review, reiterate, and improve rather than stagnate and stay in one place? And that comes from lots of angles, doesn't it? It comes from how you're boring stuff, like how you're contracting with your vendors, because you don't want to be tied in forever nowadays, because if the vendor doesn't keep pace with your ambitions, you're tied with some technology that doesn't align with where you want to be maybe in 12 months time or 2 years time. But it also comes with looking at the market and making sure that you're never settling on this is what we're going to do now for the next 2 or 3 years. I always talk about this concept of thinking about TA and HR as a product. So in the technology world, you're always releasing new features and we're improving those features and that functionality, etc. I think in TA and HR, if you have a similar mindset, we're like, okay, what's this month's sprint? What are we going to improve in our TA function? Then you'll always be, to a certain degree, by the very nature, future-proofing, because you're always moving the dial. You're always looking to improve.
Yeah. So obviously you've got experience in that TA space and you're living and breathing this with your clients at the moment. When we talk about future-proofing, do you see a shift towards skills-based recruitment? Or is skills-based recruitment, and I'm going to offer a slightly controversial opinion on this, and it's entirely down to you whether or not you disagree, is skills-based recruitment seen as competency-based recruitment, but sometimes relabeled and repurposed and actually what it's intended to do?
It's an interesting one. We are without doubt seeing a move to skills-based recruitment. It's something that comes up regularly, whether it's through HR or HR, and it becomes HR. It's not just recruitment; it's becoming a skills-based organisation. TA often is, let's focus on hiring the right skills. But we are seeing it without doubt. It's a common topic from organisations we're working with that they are wanting us to help them implement technology that supports that drive forward. And whether there's a good percentage of them jumping on a bandwagon, whether it's a renaming of something that already existed, isn't that just the world full stop to a certain degree? But I do think actually just kind of, I run a podcast called the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. And a big part of that is they're always looking at the whole skills economy, the skills agenda. They're way smarter than I am. They're deep TA and strategic workforce planning folk, and I'm just there to chaperone them. But they often get into the skills conversation. And I've challenged them in a similar way, like, is this new? Surely we're always hiring for people that could do the jobs we needed them to do. And I think where it comes in is a little bit, and you probably know this better than I, is competencies can often be a broad collection of skills, whereas skills are more about hyper-focusing on very, very specific things.
Yeah.
And what make up a competency might change over time in terms of the skills that are needed. And skills are more harder, more measurable maybe, particularly when you're looking at things like engineering or marketing maybe, or more technical roles, that you can go, well, can this person do X, Y, Z, or can they not, or how well can they do it, etc. A collection of those things might make up their whole competence for that particular role, or a competency within that role.
Yeah, so more so looking at the candidate's whole self, isn't it, and what they bring and assessing those metrics. Great. You'll be pleased to know I'm coming to the end of the questions, but I'm conscious of your time as well, because I think we've got you to a half wait. So the conversation that I've had with a lot of the people that we've done these interviews on, and it links into the skills argument, is about this current marketplace that we work within between the remote working and the office-based working. In your view, at the maybe earlier career stage type roles, does a move towards the remote working model lose some of those soft skills that we can all sit around and laugh about, but we learn how to answer the phone, how to send an email, how to shake a hand, how to do the senior stakeholder type stuff. Can you see that being lost with this sort of remote stakeholder model that we're moving?
I'm laughing because earlier you said, I'm sorry if this is a leading question. It wasn't particularly leading. This one's really leading.
Yeah. As I said it, I heard
it. But to be fair, I'm always able to be pretty objective. We're interesting that we're a 100% remote business, and we've got 28 colleagues in 13 countries across the world, and we have periodic meetups where we go around and do that, but we'd have no offices and nothing formal in terms of people coming in. And it's worked really well for us as a business, like incredibly well. We have some colleagues who are earlier in their careers, but we don't yet have any colleagues that are super early in their careers. So those kind of foundational, just left college, just left university, 18, 19, 20, 21 folk, we haven't got any in our business yet. So it's hard to say from the perspective of other as to whether it's a problem. Yeah. My finger in the air guess, and to a certain degree what we are hearing is that without a doubt, people are earlier on would get far more benefit of spending time around colleagues and learning through osmosis and sucking things up in a less structured way that you can do when you're just around folk and you're listening to how Thomas does something, how Sally does something, how John does something, and you're reframing that for how you want to work, then being left a little bit potentially isolated, sat at home somewhere. Yeah. And also, I think, environmentally, I don't mean environmentally with a green hat on, but the environment the person works in at home, if you are 18, 19, 20, 21, you're far less likely to have your own space. Like, I'm really lucky I've got my own office at home. If you're in your 30s and 40s and you've had kids, your kids are at school for most of the day, so you've got the house to yourself. But if you're 18, 19, you might be living at home with your mum and dad anyway, and they've got the office. So you're at the kitchen table, or you're somewhere where it's not so practical. So I think it's more disruptive to a certain degree not to have at least some time in an office for someone who's a little younger. But everyone's different. You know, I'm by choice quite introverted often, and I like my own space and my own time. And I was like that when I was 20. I quite easily sit myself in a room and get through a ton of work in a day, and far better than I could if I was distracted in an office environment. But other people are the opposite. They get energy from being around folks. So I don't think there's necessarily a kind of one size fits all for everyone.
Great. That's why I was leading, because that's exactly the answer I wanted. So thanks, Zoe. I've learned through these conversations how to navigate my way in. Great. Is there any closing thoughts that you've had as we sort of been discussing before we stop the recording?
It's what I keep banging on about. People are nervous about technology at the moment. They are concerned about how it's going to affect their world, and there's too many people who are perhaps pulling the duvet over their head and going, la, 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 this is going to happen to me. And unfortunately, those are the people that change will happen to first, because they're not in control of it. They're not on top of it. They're not understanding it. They're not understanding how they need to evolve to align with it. The people who will do very well out of technology and technology adoptions are the ones that are driving it, are understanding, are saying, okay, well, this does change what I do, but I understand how it changes it. So I have an opportunity to adjust how I work and be one of the folk who are supercharged by technology rather than one of the folk who are replaced by technology. Because there will always be a need for people in some way, shape or form to guide, point in the right direction, that tech. And those of you that decide to go, well, I want to be one of them, rather than be one of the folk that has technology done to them, are the ones who will prosper.